So people are still kind of coming in, so we'll get started in a few minutes, but a welcome to everyone. Feel free if you'd like to introduce each other in the chat. Okay, I will go ahead and start my spiel while people are still coming into the room. Welcome everybody to the core conversation. We've had two core conversations this month, and in both of them, we're discussing advocacy. Again, my name is Rebecca Roberts. I am from April. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman with short graying hair. You could be generous and say that it's an ash blonde, but that would be generous. We also have Don Dew here today. He's going to be facilitating the conversation and getting us started. So let me go ahead and Don, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Rebecca. My name is Don Dew. I am an executive director for Disability Resource Center of Siouxland in Sioux City, Iowa. I've been there 12 years. I am a white middle-aged male with the pronouns of he and him. I have, I'll say blonde hair. And it's not colored at all. Um, well, actually it is, um, but today we're going to be talking about system change advocacy, whatever that might mean to you. And was there more that you were going to be saying, Rebecca? Sorry.
Yeah, just very quickly. I wanted to say a few things. Remember, this is a conversation, and so we want anyone to participate. You can participate in the discussion. You can share what you're doing with advocacy and what you're doing with your program, the issues that you care about. Maybe you have some questions for Don or other participants. You can participate just by turning on your microphone if you'll keep it on mute until otherwise. And when you turn it on, I'll try to acknowledge you, but if I'm missing seeing it, go ahead and speak up. Also, if you're more comfortable, you can type your comments or your questions into the chat, and I will try to keep track of that and share them as we go along. So let me go ahead and stop this share. And we will get it going on. Also, if you want to see the closed captioning, you have a button at the bottom of your screen, and you can set that up for yourself. Thank you.
All right, great. So I know the last time you kind of talked more about where you did both self-advocacy and systems change advocacy. Systems advocacy, we're looking at a broad um, swath of what can be done. I don't know if anybody off the top of their head has, what they might be doing. I can tell you one thing. Like we're a small center in Northwest Iowa. Um, One thing that we've actually had to kind of do is so we do a lot of IEPs in schools, right? And but the school district does not always adhere to IDEA, surprisingly enough, or even doing IEPs like they're supposed to. So our center made a conscious decision to start having an attorney attend IEPs and start doing complaints against the school district. And we saw that as a necessary systems change advocacy effort on our part, because otherwise students and their parents do not have that access to do that. And we changed so we could have proper equity for students against a school district that was not giving them equity. What we found is, a school district that is more able to listen willing to listen because they kind of have to. And we've set precedent setting rulings with the Iowa Department of Education, where now we're able to say, we've already done this battle. You cannot be setting these type of rules with children. And so it gives us a little bit of strength. And I think that's a lot of what systems change advocacy means to me, is getting not only equity, but giving us a little bit of leverage, because we don't have leverage a lot of times at all. We don't have equity many times at all. But to get that and be able to use that, I think is very important. But I'm not going to be the only person that's going to talk. So what's going on in your area? What do you see as a big issue in your area? I'd love to hear from anybody. D.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dee Henry. I'm the Disability Rights and Advocacy Specialist at the Independence Alliance, formerly known as SILO, Center for Independent Living Options. We're just now getting a new name and logo. And one of the big things that we are working on is in terms of voting. Curbside voting is one of the big topics that we have been starting in our communities and other voting circles. And we have been able to, we started the process last year, right before the elections in Hamilton County. They were not offering curbside voting equitably. They were, to put it short, they were expecting a curbside voter to bring an additional person with them to the poll to walk in and tell the people that they were there to curbside vote, and not having any signage because they accused people of faking their disability to use curbside voting. So once they told us all this, the Board of Elections did directly. And we tried to work directly with them to say, how can we, fix this problem and make this a better solution? It wasn't until we got other groups involved, maybe, other groups that have bigger standing in the voting world. And now that we have had good discussions with the Hamilton County BOE, and they're going to be completely changing how they do their curbside voting process, having an option, for someone to be able to call a number and say, hey, I'm, in the parking spot here to curbside vote, have two people from the different parties come out and, help me vote. And so I think it's a good start to making voting more accessible and making sure that poll workers are ready for us at the polls.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dee. Rebecca.
Before I comment, are we talking more on a systemic level or an individual level? Because there's several different things going on that I'm working on.
So Rebecca, I saw your name come up and I thought, wait, did I raise my hand? Because my name is Rebecca too. So I will tell you this, we had this scheduled to talk about individual advocacy last time and systems advocacy this time. In some of the emails that went out inviting people, those things were switched. But we did find in the last conversation in talking about individual advocacy that was really connected to systems advocacy. So I don't know that we have to draw any kind of strict line here today, although we're learning a lot about systems advocacy. As far as discussing what you're doing, those two things are hooked, and you're welcome to talk about any advocacy that you'd like.
Yeah, there's so many different things to talk about. So I'm trying to hone in on which system advocacy I'm working on. I guess one of the big ones is here I'm with Independence First we're in the city of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee County had transportation system had offered in the past a paratransit system, and they discontinued it. And the reason being is they said that it was not in compliance because they did not have any vans that could provide transport for people with mobility disabilities. So we reached out to the county supervisors on, let's look at and readdress this and what can we do. So they developed at the request of the county supervisors, that we have a task force, and we were meeting regularly, and sometimes we were meeting like 2-3 times a week to develop an RFI And we're now getting ready to sign a sole source because they did allocate funds for that. But as part of that process, also, our regional planning commission said, well, we don't know what to do. We don't know what you want from us. You know, we don't have money to give. And I'm like, we know what the ADA is, but what are you doing to educate the communities out there on their responsibilities under the ADA? So we are working now with our regional planning commission that takes in 7 counties, and we're going to have a training on all of the public entities' responsibilities under the ADA. It's going to be a full training session on, you know, where are they on their self-surveys and transition plans and that. So that all came up as results initially from transit, and it kind of blossomed into many different things.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay.
We have a comment in the chat. Catherine said she's the project coordinator for a statewide advocacy group that consists of 15 CILs across her state. They focus on systematic advocacy in transportation, housing, and home and community-based services. In housing, they've been present and involved in stakeholder groups with others that were hosted by the Department of Human Services, who's drafting a housing strategy plan. I would encourage you, Catherine, if you want to share more about that, or if anyone else is interested or involved in housing.
Absolutely. That sounds like a really strong advocacy group in that state. Yeah.
It does.
So, what state was that? Did it say?
It did not say.
Catherine.
Catherine, are you here? Catherine, if you'd like to share, just raise your hand. Otherwise, if you would like me to share more for you, if you could add in the chat what state you're from, that would be great.
All right.
Oh, she's in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. All right. How many of your different states have a good, strong advocacy group? I mean, not every state does. If you want to just raise your hands, if you can, we can kind of see. It's and it doesn't have to be an ADAPT group, you know, although ADAPT is more well known, but not having a good, clear advocacy group does hamper getting things done sometimes. When you do have a good one, or a concentrated one, then you're able to get these plans in motion. In Nebraska, where I'm an executive director of their SILC there, but I'm part of the Nebraska ADAPT, and we've had to reconstitute it because otherwise we didn't have an advocacy group to really do that. So it just makes it difficult, especially when you're trying to do systems change advocacy. You really need that strong advocacy group with forms of how you're going to be doing it. It has to really be concentrated on how you're going to be working on that advocacy. So we have people that are working on housing, transportation. Catherine says her advocacy group is small, thriving, has been advocates and some more seasoned. Who else has a good advocacy group they want to talk about? Anyone? Yeah, we're quiet. Okay.
Shemaine added in the, did I say that right? Shemaine added in the chat that Center for Independence in Colorado is also working to improve systems advocacy in the area of housing. working with the city's housing division, focus groups, and educating tenants to improve tenant-landlord relations.
Oh, very nice. Okay. It's such a big thing right now, and it's gotten so much worse in the last, I'd say, 6 months. Housing, after the declaration was the emergency declaration in April, was it? It's not even 6 months ago. We've had a lot more landlords just evicting people for no reason too. But there's no other housing, so you can't just find housing for people. And we have that whole lack of affordable, accessible housing to begin with. That it's been an effort for years and years to get either new stock or make the existing stock of housing accessible, and nobody wants to do that. So
I'm seeing some folks in the chat. Several people are listing the advocacy groups that they have. Greg listed in Oklahoma, they have ADAPT and the Progressive Independents, but he says the constituency is not responsive enough. I see some D shared again, some specific issue focused groups, the Ohio Olmsted Task Force, which is a statewide grassroots coalition. And there's also some other groups that have shared. I want to encourage you, you don't have to just share in the chat. It really will be a richer conversation if some people will join in. And I wanted to get back to Greg's comment that there is a group, but it is hard to get a constituency together. And maybe we could open it up for people to talk about not just what they're doing, but some of the struggles that they're facing. And we can help each other as a group. That's the idea of a peer conversation. So I'd really like to see some hands raised, and let's talk about the issues you care about and the issues that you're facing. Oh, we do have a hand raised. It's D.
D.
Sorry, I already spoke, but if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the Ohio Olmsted Task Force that I put in the chat, and I put the link there too. This is a really amazing group, led by and for people with disabilities, grassroots, like it mentions. It meets totally online, so you technically, you could be out of state and join. I think they're open meetings pretty much, so you just have to contact the chair to get the link. So if anybody's in a place where they want a group but they can't find one nearby, please feel free to join us. And there are certain issues that are more focused on, but really anything is up for discussion. I recently just became the chair of their housing committee or housing work group. So we're doing stuff in housing, but they're also, they do a lot with, the caregiving crisis and things like that. They hosted an event recently, Celebrate Our Carers, to bring awareness at the Ohio State House to legislators who need to be making better laws and such about this. There's also, we did an accessibility audit of the Ohio State House as well, which was very enlightening. So that's a great group. The chair, Jennifer, she's also on a lawsuit right now in the state of Ohio with the League of Women Voters regarding voting laws in Ohio for who can drop off an absentee ballot. If people aren't familiar, there's a very now tiny list of family members who are allowed to do that. Clearly that is discriminatory if you don't have those family members, to be able to do that. So she is a really great person just to learn from as well. So I'd highly recommend coming to one of those meetings. And then I wanted to ask for advice in the peer discussion. For where I work, Independence Alliance, we host a monthly peer and advocacy support group. So it's 2 in 1 called the Disability Community. And this is for disabled, Two-Spirit, LGBTQ plus people, and allies, obviously. Everyone's welcome, but that is the focus, is the crux of those 2 identities. And we were able to do a lot of advocacy work with Cincinnati Pride, which just happened this past weekend, incorporating a lot more accessibility features. But we definitely struggle with, getting people to come to the meetings. We're finally just starting to get more consistent attendees. We do host it hybrid, in person and on Zoom. But if anybody has recommendations for ways to keep people involved, and also, I guess, a specific question is, when we want to do advocacy work, everyone has their own way of doing it, and everyone has their own knowledge coming into it. So I guess I've never really tried to teach people how to do systems advocacy. I've always been focused on helping them advocate for themselves as an individual. So if anyone has good recommendations on like teaching people to do systems advocacy and the nuances of that, I'd be interested. Thanks.
Joan also has her hand raised. Joan?
It's back on housing. So if you wanted to finish Dee's thread, that's fine too. If someone has a comment on the voter, but mine is more on the housing thing. Whichever, however you want to do it.
Do we have anyone that wants to reply to Dee, talk about housing or give her the advice she's talking about in getting people involved? Yes, you have your hand raised, Catherine.
Hi. So Dee, I don't know if this will help, but with getting people involved, we have found it helpful with our statewide advocacy group. Obviously, we are coming from all different parts of the county or the Commonwealth, I'm sorry. So we've got people that are in the big cities and people that are out in the country. And what has been helpful for us is to have them all bring their stories and their experience and their barrier and have our advocates find that connection of what is that central theme, because then they can advocate together on that topic and kind of support each other. And so sometimes we're just addressing the city folk, as we call it. But then in a month or two, we're focusing on supporting the county folk, but we're all kind of there together because we're all sharing that. So I don't know if that would help you guys at all.
Thank you, Catherine.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And this is Dawn. I'm sorry. I think we've all been there trying to get people to attend. It's like people don't see that as a priority. Oh, it's advocacy, right? They want to do it in the now. They don't want to plan and get together and either do peer support or plan advocacy because they don't see that as unnecessary to actually, oh, we got to plan this. Because there are things that have to be planned. So it's just it is so hard, but there are ways, and especially if people realize that what you're doing is good and you have a fun time doing it, right? It builds. But yeah, it's an effort everywhere, I think.
Dawn or Rebecca? Sorry. This is Teresa in Missoula, Montana, and I cannot figure out how to raise my hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
But so I just wanted to, I just recently went to a summit, they called it, for homelessness and shelters. And it was a very enlightening thing. One of the things that we're seeing is that shelters don't have enough accessibility for people with mobility impairments. Oftentimes it's difficult to impossible for people with certain types of mobility impairments to sleep on the mats and low cots that they have at the shelters. So we're slowly trying to build some conversation around that to encourage them to include more of that. But one of the important things I thought that came out of this this summit discussion was the suggestion that we as individuals or as CILs or as other advocacy groups encourage our consumers to get to know their representatives, whether it's their city council representative in their ward, or it's a county commissioner, Or here in Missoula, we're really lucky because our state legislators are always very involved in the community. So it's easy to get to know them. And go tell your individual stories to them. And that's kind of where that that meshing of individual advocacy and systems advocacy meet. That getting out there, if you're not comfortable going by yourself, take a couple friends. If you see that one of these people that could have an effect on this is having a, you know, a listening session or an open house or whatever it might be, go and address these issues, because the more often they see you and the more personal your story becomes to them, the more they're going to remember this and take it to heart. It's not just numbers on a piece of paper anymore. It's actual people affected by these situations, and that just builds upon itself. And then when they have to make votes on these things and help influence decisions, your stories come to their mind, and they're more likely to do things that are going to help the situation. And that works for housing as well as pretty much anything else. If it's just accessibility, you know, public accessibility or state funding, any of it. But getting out there, getting to know these people on a personal level that you vote for and that represent you, and letting them know you and letting them know how their decisions influence your life is a really big deal.
Absolutely.
I'd like to take a step back to the housing issue just because we have a lot of comments on it, and I'm not trying to slow anybody down. I'd first like to say that there was, who posted this? Beck Levin, I think, posted a link for D. Henry, but it was kind of interesting. There's a Medicare for All leadership school that gave her vital community organizing and system change info. So Beck has posted that link in the chat, and that would be really useful. I'm going to share a couple of comments about housing, and then we had somebody with their hand raised, Deva or Diva, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Let me read a few of these chats, and then we'll have you tell us about your situation, all right? Let's see, there were just several people. I'm slipping back. People talk about, Shemaine said landlord engagement is a priority in the community, and not just to simply to help people get housed, but to maintain housing. Teresa shared, here in Missoula, Montana, we're seeing growth in the cooperation between disability advocacy organizations and low-income housing options. Habitat for Humanity is even becoming more involved in projects outside the box to help with housing issues here. We have a small ADAPT representation. Missoula is also a blue island in a red state, and that sometimes makes systems advocacy more challenging. I can relate to that. I'm in Wyoming. Let's see. Deva, I'll let you go ahead and speak, and then Joan, I think, also wanted to speak on the housing issue. Sure, I can read your chat. She says that they could use a coalition of small landlords to buy materials at wholesale. The housing program in rural Humboldt County or California housing is the cost of materials to maintain rental properties has gone so far up that small landlords cannot afford it and houses are sitting empty. So that is
I'm also I am also I am a landlord.
You're a landlord.
And that can happen, you know. Some disabled people are found everywhere. But I can't pay what the materials cost. So wholesale.
Thank you. Joan, did you want to come back around to your comments on housing?
I was just gonna say, kind piggybacking on what you were talking about, that there's not enough affordable accessible housing out there. One of the things that Colorado has done for quite a few years now is that they've actually got a home owner's tax credit, that if you modify your home, put in a ramp, do modify a bathroom, making it accessible, they actually offer tax incentives. So I was kind of curious if any other states have also implemented that, which, you know, it's a pretty big help when you're putting a modification in. It increases the availability of affordable, accessible housing, because there's a lot of rental kind of things happening in Colorado because we can't afford homes. And so it increases the market as well and does well for everybody who needs it.
Thank you. It says ECNV. We have another raised hand. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, hi. This is Doris Ray at ECNV, Independence Center of Northern Virginia. I wanted to comment that we here in Virginia have had over the years a number of programs that developed that resulted from advocacy. One of them being an assistive technology loan fund with zero interest that people could avail themselves of for home modifications. And then we also have a tax credit, which originally was only offered, and we advocated at the General Assembly level at our state legislature for these things. So we have a tax credit program, zero interest, and for home mods, and it got expanded. At first, it was initially just for consumers and families, but it got expanded to include developers, so that when single-family housing is built, there was that, and there is. You know, but the building code seems to be key to just about everything, and I think it's Georgia, and it may be a couple of other places, and in Atlanta for sure, that they've had a visitability portion of the code that became mandatory. But right now, we've been on a campaign largely at the local level through our housing commissions and local jurisdictions, at least up here in Northern Virginia, to get our developers here for affordable housing to, when they have site plans going through the local zoning process, to get them to apply for competitive tax credits from Virginia Housing. So if they like it because it's a good financial incentive, and it comes with the string that 10% of the total number of units in the multifamily development, new multifamily development, must be type A units, you know, ready to rent or to buy, or for people who are wheelchair users or have other physical disabilities and use mobility devices. And that has worked really here well in one of our jurisdictions, much better than the local option. We have to go to our state legislator for everything. We're a Dillon state, and there are 9 of those, I understand. So, so we have local option for like a half dozen of our jurisdictions where they have an affordable dwelling unit program and using some percentage that I'm not sure that even though I've been briefed on it, I'm not sure I understand it. There's a certain, depending on the number of units, there's a requirement for type A fully accessible units, but we become convinced here, and this is starting to ramp up for a second try at the state level, to advocate to get the Virginia General Assembly to direct the building code officials to increase the percentage of fully accessible type A units from 2% of the units to 10% of the units. And so I think actually, and I was on the Nickel Housing Subcommittee, I think we need to get together at a national level. And just last week, I was in a meeting on affordable housing with Senator Warner from Virginia, and he was talking about a bill in Congress that would put some requirement like the one I said that we have for the 10% if you're using tax credits, make it more of a national thing. But I really think getting to all the building codes and getting them to increase that percentage in like every state,
Yeah.
so that there's enough momentum.
It's
Yeah.
important.
And I know it's only for multifamily, and that's not
Yeah.
necessarily.
Thank you for those comments. If you have a link to anything about that legislation, it would be helpful, I think, for people across the board. We do have 2 other hands raised, and there's quite a few comments that are
Thank you.
listed on
Thank
this.
you.
After our folks speak, I will try to get back to the comments, or you can read through them yourself. But it sounds like this is a really important issue. So let's have Rebecca speak first, and then Maria.
So I'm going to kind of piggyback on the last speaker's comments. So I'm in the state of Wisconsin, and this has been a bone of contention for me in regards to what the International Building Code, which was what most states have adopted as their model building codes, which brings down the percentage of type A accessible units to 2% for multi-dwelling units, R2 residencies, as they call it in the building code. And I'm like, why? Because Section 504, if you're using federal funds, that's 5%. And that is all your building code official is going to look at. So even if you're using any kind of federal funds, that 5% is not going to be applied, or hopefully the architects and the owners will apply it. Let me put it that way. But as far as plan review and plan inspection, it's not going to happen because they're going off of the building code. That's what they're referring to. That is the only thing that they have authority to enforce. That's one problem. But even with tax credits, the Wisconsin Housing and Equal Development Agency here that distributes those tax credits, they require 20% of those developers that get those tax credits, that 20% have to be type A accessible dwelling units. But then again, there is no oversight or enforcement of that. You can say that on your spreadsheet, but there's no plan examiner or no building code building inspector being able to go out and verify that, nor does our agency here in Wisconsin do that. So I think not only do we need to look at upping the amount of accessible dwelling units or the scoping of it. But also that there is some legal pathway to enforce that as well.
That's an excellent point, Rebecca. Maria, you have some comments?
Hi, this is Maria. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So I am at the Independence Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I mostly do outreach. So all of this is going to come from an outreach perspective, but I work with our advocacy specialist as well. Just for outreach, it's always about thinking outside the box. So several of the comments that people have made all of this come to the front of my head. We've been taking advantage of working with housing groups, mental health alliances, and then the mayor of Colorado Springs started an initiative that's going through the summer, I think until September, called the 1,000 neighborhood gatherings. And so several neighborhoods that are facing being priced out of their neighborhoods or developers wanting to kind of sweep in and take over those homes have been gathering out of these different groups to talk about how to help homeowners stay in their homes, help renters be able to afford living where they're living. And so a lot of the neighborhoods are starting to come together and meet at community centers, or we've even had a group near us, one of our local neighborhoods met at one of our community centers so that they could talk about the city wanted to reroute a railroad track. And so that would displace several people from their homes. And so our advocacy specialist was speaking with them and from representatives from the state to make sure that these people did not lose their homes. And so those are just some of the ways where people are starting to gather where we're at. And then also for the one of our rural areas has a mental health alliance. And so one thing we've been working on as a subgroup is a neighborhood connector group. And so we've been trying to activate certain areas of the rural county to see if local people want to be neighborhood connectors so that they can help get their neighbors connected to local resources, including advocacy issues. And so that's something we've been working on and creating a handbook and events for people to attend, like barbecues and ice cream socials. We don't have very many people. We have about 4 people right now, neighborhood connectors, but we keep working to get the word out so people will come together and start talking. We're also working with construction trade schools for the people who are not getting the funding they need. They apply for grant funding, but sometimes they get denied. And so we'll work with a construction trade school. And we have a grant fund where we can buy some material. And then the construction trade school students can actually build certain ramps and certain ADA type, things like installing grab bars or helping with ramps, certain home modifications they can help out with. So anyway, more thoughts are coming, but I'm going to pass it on to the next person. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to read some comments, unless Aaron, you want to talk about this, but Aaron Ferrier has written in the chat, in rural Northeast Washington, there's an overall fear of change. Advocacy is a challenge due to community members not wanting those types of people here, even though we are already here. NIMBYism is a huge problem. We've been trying to break ground on a 72-unit low-income apartment complex for the past 4 years. This project is grant funded. The land has already been blessed by the tribe, yet here we are waiting for zoning to be approved. Families have been on the waiting list this whole time. We haven't had new apartments built in over 20 years. We have a severe housing shortage, and our population is growing. So she talks about like RVs and other homeless encampments that are happening in her area. And I just wanted to share that because that's been sitting there in the chat for a while. I'm going to go ahead and call on Mary because she hasn't shared so far. Mary.
Yeah, this is Murray Helbig. Let me turn on my video. There we go. So I'm from Central Illinois, and the state of Illinois, I was kind of responding to the landlords that are not participating in the voucher program. So in Illinois, in January, we had, I don't know if they call it a law, but it's under fair housing, and you cannot, it's called source of income. So no longer can anyone discriminate against what your source of income is. So if that's a voucher, they have to take it. They can't choose not to. If it's Social Security, they can't discriminate against you. So we're kind of in that process where we have referred a few people to our free legal services that have fair housing as one of their services. And we're just waiting to see what's going to happen with those cases. And then another thing with our, we have a statewide network of centers for independent living. And we had a state legislator that was super interested in home mods. And we finally got some money statewide for each center to have to do home mods in their service area. So it's takes up tons of time because you have to do the audits and find contractors and all that. And it's the first time that our center is doing that, but it's very exciting. So just wanted to share that stuff.
Thank you.
Good.
I do want to add, Amy Hawkins had a comment regarding housing. In Lawrence County, rent is so high that the Section 8 vouchers are not high enough for voucher holders to actually find an apartment or a house. So landlords don't want to participate in that program anymore. And HUD turned down the county's request for an increase. And so she asked a question about, is anybody else having this, and how do you go about getting vouchers raised? So just before we move on, I want to point out, or I just want to remind you, we will be addressing these issues as we're going on. Maybe if people have resources they could share for national or local support and some strategies for what they're doing. If you don't get a chance to talk, please share that in the chat. Any resources are appreciated. At the end of this call, we'll be sending out a transcript or a recording of this call, and also a list of the resources that are posted in this chat or that we hear about later. Also, at the end of this call, you're going to be asked to complete a survey, and it's really important to us that we get your feedback. So I want to remind and encourage you to please complete the survey at the end of this call. I feel like that was my public service interruption and announcement. We have one hand up. Dawn, did you have anything you wanted to share before we?
I do. Now, we do have a monthly advocacy meeting. But we also, we do have a standalone transportation committee, and we do have a standalone housing committee that just has not actually been concentrated yet. So we need a chair, we need members. Sounds like there's enough people interested in housing, we might be able to do that. So it's
You want
something.
to give more information on that advocacy meeting? They can access that through April.
Through April, you have to register. It's the first Wednesday of the month. It's at, I know it's what, 3 o'clock Central. So whatever your time is.
We'll put that information in the resources that go out as well after this call. Thanks, Dawn. So we have a hand that's been up for a while. I'll go ahead and, if you have your hand raised, you can go ahead and speak. I have forgotten your name and you're on the phone, so. From ECNB?
Oh, it's still up. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I
it's
didn't
just still
mean
up.
that, but
Okay.
but no, that's all right. The one thing I will add about the issue of the possibility of increasing the percentage of type A units in the building code, all the points that the lady who spoke after me made are right on the money, and the best thing, at least as far as accessible housing, even accessible affordable housing in the multifamily sector, is that if it's in the building code, like she said, they have to enforce it before there's ever an occupancy permit issued, and that's the way it is in our state, and it appears in every state or other states. And our building code officials, no matter what we do, and I've been serving on the Housing Commission in Arlington, Virginia for like 12 or 13 years now, and I've learned so much from doing that. So I think getting our consumers and our advocates onto those housing commissions is important. But I think now is the time to strike, to get, if we can find a way. That's why I spoke up with when Senator Warner was here in Arlington for that housing summit. If we can get people like Warner, who is very interested in business and in communities and in affordable housing, so if we can get him interested in this, if there's an increase in the percentage of fully accessible units in the building codes, it'll be enforced, and we'll get more stock, and it'll be at all levels of affordability, which is and it's not just limited to tax credit projects or anything HUD Section 504 projects and stuff like that, because we've lost so much time finding out things like the building code officials will not enforce.
Right.
So and the other thing I suggest is for all of us advocates and consumers at CIL and our advocacy groups is to get involved in boards and commissions, particularly in housing and zoning, and the people who develop. I don't know what you guys have, but we have a comprehensive plan for at least all of our big jurisdictions, and to get that similar language in there, and for local, I don't know what you have, but in our comprehensive plans, we have affordable housing master plans and ordinances. And if you get language about both affordability, up to whatever it is, 30% of AMI, which is the hardest for area median income AMI, or up to 60 or whatever it is. And
right.
Working on that issue by issue in local government and then state government, I think it's important, but it's long. It's a long.
Yeah.
That is a really, really important point, is to get people on those local boards, those commissions, the groups that are making those decisions. We have just 5 minutes left, and Dee has had their hand raised for a while. I do want to point out that Alyssa has posted the link to the advocacy committee that Dawn was referring to in the comments. And Dee, let's go ahead and hear what you have to say.
I'll be real quick. I went to go register for the advocacy committee, and I just wanted to say that for the last question where it asks if you need an accommodation, there's no option for like non-applicable. So just in case, if that can be added, I'm still going to register. I just don't want it to mess up, like if you keep statistics for like how many people request certain things. But
all right. Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll take a look at that. And Catherine asked if this was for Pacific region only. No, this is a national, I don't mean to speak for you, Don, but this is a national group.
Right.
All right. So I really appreciate all of the discussion that's going on, and I really appreciate the people that are posting resources in the comments. Don, I'll give you let's see what you have to say that maybe can offer
Oh.
some support for these folks.
Well, I'm really encouraged with everything I've heard today because there's a lot of good things going on out there, and there's a lot of information sharing, I think, amongst us. And I think that's one thing we have to keep up, whether it's through the advocacy committee, whether it's through the housing committee, transportation, whichever, the more that we can share, the more knowledgeable we will be for our consumers, and the stronger we will be to get this advocacy done. And that's what we need to do. This is the year advocacy is done for people with disabilities. And that's just period right there. So that's kind of what I have.
All right. I do want to remind you that there's going to be a survey at the end of the core conversation, and we really appreciate your feedback. And also, I'd like to let you know that we will be, I believe the topic for July is going to be transition. And as we plan the next year, I would welcome your suggestions for topics for this meeting. So my contact information is available and will be available on the email that goes out. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. We've had a great hour, and it seems like housing is among one of the many important issues that nationwide we need to be advocating for. And also all of those, housing is an issue that's influenced at every level, from cities to states to national legislation, and also getting out there and working with those private entities or other nonprofits. And it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. So that's the time that we have for today. So thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And I will go ahead and end the meeting.